Welcome to JGTCR, I'm Cope, and today we are tuning the Aston Martin V12 Vantage GT3. Let's get into it. In factory trim, the V12 Vantage is an awesome race car. It is peak beginner friendly and moving more to an intermediate race car. The first thing to mention is how well it handles. It zigs and zags according to our inputs without issue. This is actually quite an amazing feat considering the engine, layout, and weight associated with this vehicle. It also speaks volumes as to how well balanced the V12 Vantage actually is. The power delivery itself is not too aggressive. However, it can step the tail end out if we are too forceful in our driving. The brakes work extremely well and have no issues under most conditions. Even if we are trail braking or making adjustments mid-turn, this Aston Martin remains solid under braking. Let's jump ahead and collect our time. 6 minutes 36.9 seconds. And now our race tune. When modified, the V12 Vantage had some issues with understeer. It wasn't a big issue, but annoying enough that we needed to do something about it. For body height adjustment, we ran the nose slightly tilted. This slight shifting of weight over the front wheels gives us more maneuverability. We also firmed up the suspension at the front and increased the negative camber angle to 3.8, while the rear end of the suspension was made softer, as this gives us more traction when exiting corners. Let's see it in action. When completely modified, the V12 Vantage lost some of its drivability. There was plenty of oversteer and understeer available for all driving styles. Fortunately, tweaking some of the settings helped calm these issues down. Naturally, there's still a considerable amount of wheel spin in first and second gear. However, once the V12 Vantage is up and moving, it is much more stable and reliable in the higher gears. The handling itself is far more direct. The vehicle responds very well to our inputs, so for the most part the balance has been restored. The power delivery in the top end gears is great, however the lower gears will have to be modulated to prevent wheel spin. The brakes remain amazing as ever without any issues. Now let's get that time. 6 minutes 20.3 seconds. And now the drift tune. The first thing to note is that we have removed the supercharger. This was due to the power delivery being far too aggressive. And even with the factory power output, the delivery was still a touch too aggressive. To counter this, we reduced the acceleration sensitivity in the differential. But alas, the tail end was still a touch too snappy-tom for its own good, so we added ballast of 160 kilos at a ballast positioning of 40 over the rear wheels. The rest of the suspension setup is relatively par for the course. The tail end of the vehicle sitting lower than the front, as well as a softer suspension setup at the rear with more camber. Let's drift Suzuka. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Modern race cars on GT7 do not lend themselves particularly well to drift. They can do it, but are somewhat reluctant. In a perfect world with countless hours to spend, a greater tune could be put together. But with only 20 to 30 minutes on the clock, ain't nobody got time for that. While the V12 Vantage does drift, it is moody about it. It drifts reasonably well, but manages to feel a touch twitchy. The additional weight over the rear wheels does help us with directional drift, but this does come at a cost of leading the drift with the tail, which feels awkward at best. The vehicle's response to our inputs is rather weird, and leaves us with a sensation of having too much grip while also not having enough grip. As such, it ends up feeling as if it's fighting us all the way. So while it can be drifted, it is a far cry to say that it is easy. The Aston Martin V12 Vantage GT3 is a great beginner to intermediate race car. In factory trim, it provides enough power and handling to be considered a decent step up from a beginner race car. When completely modified and tuned, it increases the volume once again so we can test our true grit out on the racetrack. When it comes to the drift arena, it is capable but is missing a certain je ne sais quoi to make it a competitive and reliable drift car. So it's probably best to leave this one at home. And that's all we have for you today, so until next time, keep racing!